One.
Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 46th, count 'em, 46th Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition. I want to welcome my listeners at the Progressive Radio Network, the Solartopia Green Power and Wellness Show. I'm wearing my Solartopia shirt today, but you can't see it. You will be on with us for an hour at PRN. If you want to stick with it later, we go for at least another half hour afterwards. Come join us at the Election Protection 2024.org website. That's electionprotection2024.org. You can get the link to continue, but we have been broadcasting our meetings on election protection on the Progressive Radio Network. We are really thrilled to have you with us. We've got over 70 people on the call right now, and what we do after a 2-week break for Passover and Easter is that we get deep into the weeds on the business of the most important business in American democracy, protecting our elections. And we are joined by an incredible group of activists and leaders and really, really powerful people to get deep into the details so that we know what's being done to our elections and that we can reverse it. And of course, right now we're deep in the discussions of what's been going on in Georgia. The corporate response was truly astounding, actually. And GLORIA TINUBU will be joining us and others to talk about that. I'm co-hosting, as always, co-convening with the great Joel Segal in North Carolina, former aide to John Conyers. We're engineered by Mike Hirsch and Steve Caruso. Mike Hirsch with the Progressive Democrats of America. Steve Caruso, a mainstay of the Columbus-based freepress.org. We got a tremendously packed agenda, as you might imagine today. We are going to talk later. I want to talk about the Amazon strike. I know it doesn't seem to be directly related to election protection, although they are challenging the election. At least 500 ballots in this unsuccessful attempt to unionize an Amazon plant are being challenged. We can talk about the filibuster and some pretty amazing developments, positive developments against the filibuster, thanks to the Senate parliamentarian and things being pushed by Chuck Schumer, of all people. We're going to be joined later in the call by a great activist and leader in Washington, D.C., about the question of how this change in the filibuster rule will affect DC statehood, which is a really, really big deal. We're going to talk about H.R. 1, H.R. 4, the Georgia miracle, and the possibility of a book and a documentary film. We're joined on today's call by Steve Rosenfeld, who has been absolutely spectacular in his journalistic coverage of the election issue, along with Art Levine, who's been writing for various publications. But Steve is talking now. We are talking together about doing a book on this. There is also, amazingly enough, there's a recall movement against the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, the Klan's very own governor. They're gathering signatures to put him on the recall ballot. So we like that. And we want a big shout out, in case we miss it, to Major League Baseball for moving the All-Star game to Denver. I'm really glad to see that. That's a major political statement. I don't think that's ever been done in the history of Major League Baseball. I do not think a game of any kind has ever been moved for political reasons. So it's a major landmark. Elsa is also going to talk to us about the Gwinnett, Georgia election board. She sent me a really amazing piece on that. And we want to, again, give a shout out to Will Smith for moving his film production from Georgia in protest against the new Jim Crow laws there. So there's a ton we're going to cover. We're joined by the great Ray McClendon from Atlanta, James FUKUDA from New York, and GLORIA TINUBU. And I want Joel Segal, my co-convener, to introduce the organizational stuff. A tremendous amount has been going on in the last 2 weeks to push us forward organizationally. And then we'll also get into the weeds on the issues that I just raised. So let me turn this over to Joel, and then we'll come back and deal with these issues. You can hand raise on the chat anytime you want. And as I say, this is going to go out on the radio. So Joel Siegel, take it away.
Hey, Harvey, thank you for your leadership. You've been an intrepid warrior, and we missed you for 2 weeks. And Mike Hirsch, Steve Caruso, thanks for your engineering of all the work that you guys have done, on this call. I did want to say that I've been looking at Tom Crumrich's background. I just find it completely fascinating. If you get a chance to look at whatever is going on in that background, I just thought I've never seen anything like that, like in a Zoom background. It's really pretty hip.
Yeah.
So what's been going on? I want to make a point. The fact that we have Cat with a C and Cat with a K just shows you that we have a constituency for fighting voter suppression and getting out the vote, because Cat was saying, hey, I heard about this on the radio and I want to be a part of this. And I hope that this group will continue to expand, because it's going to take, I can't curse on this, you're on radio. We're going to have a heck of a big movement to defeat the right-wing forces. I'll just leave it at that. So anyway, without further ado, what we're going to talk about today is a pretty phenomenal campaign to save our democracy. And I'm going to call on the leaders of the campaign. There's so much that has happened in terms of moving our work forward. But basically, the Save Our Democracy campaign is going to focus most of our energy on how do we replicate what we call the Georgia miracle and what Gloria calls relational organizing. And the Georgia, miracle is a Jewish and a Black senator in Georgia. I live in North Carolina, and Georgia is supposed to be more, regressive than us. Somehow got 2 progressive senators elected. We want to be able to share the knowledge by the people who are actually running the campaign and export it to other states so we can get out the vote. Now, we're nonpartisan, but we think that maximizing the vote is what we need to do. And the Georgia Miracle manifests what happens when you have relational organizing. You get where the people are on the ground and you get them to vote. That's what we're going to be talking about. And then we got symposiums at universities. All of a sudden, I'm all big on this screen. That was kind of cool. Thank you, Mike. All right. So without further ado, let's get started with the Save Our Democracy campaign. I'm going to call on Gloria, James, Ray, Steve, and then Professor Poga also will be doing a symposium on voter suppression at a date that we'll announce later. But Gloria, why don't you talk about some of the ideas that we've been talking about in terms of the Save Our Democracy campaign, and then you can talk a little bit too about the boycotts and because I remember you shared that idea with me and our group a while back. But why is relational organizing so important? Why did it work in Georgia? Why do we need to export it to other states?
Yeah,
especially the swing states. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joe.
Sure.
I'd like to also say that Ray is the one who really has really emphasized and amplified the notion of relational organizing. I've been more along the side of nonviolent direct action, right? Us responding to some of these segregationist, suppressionist, new segregationist laws. In the 2020 election, we know that one of the things that happened was people in Southwest Georgia, for example, in rural areas, used the relationships that they had developed over years to bring out the vote. And this didn't just start 10 years ago. It didn't even just start 20 years ago. It really started back in 1961, almost 60 years ago, when the Southwest Georgia Project was first founded. And they started with the notion of breaking the band of segregationists with nonviolent direct action. And so it started, and that group of people who started that movement are still around, and they've employed it in the more recent times to get people out to vote. And people were willing to come out to vote because folks had been in the vineyard working for decades to build these kinds of relationships. So this notion of using your relationships to get people out to vote is not new. particularly to the African American community, because that's what we've relied on, whether it was our relationships through our church members, through family members, through other civic organizations. We've used those relational ties to make sure that people, trusted us first, and then they were more willing to follow our advice or counsel once we asked them to vote or do anything else. So, and it's also pivotal and important when it comes to direct action, which is a big deal for people to make a sacrifice, not to use a certain product, not to go on the bus, not to spend their dollars with a certain business. So we've had to employ those practices for many decades now. And the thing that is not often spoken about when it comes to direct action, for example, is the fact that this country was founded on direct action. The Boston Tea Party was a collective direct action against oppressive behavior. So it's, this idea of relationships and relational organizing and collective direct action is as old as this country is. And so we hope to re-employ those tools to affect the change that we want right now. In terms of our new effort, we are looking to, our mission is to ensure that every voice is heard and counted equally in our democracy. That's our mission. And our objective is to partnership with grassroots organizations on a continual basis, not just temporarily, not just in an election cycle, but continually, and use the tools of relational organizing and collective action to register voters, to educate voters, and to mobilize voters. And we, as Joel said, we are looking at doing some speaking engagements the latter part of this month, and Joel can give you more details about that. And James has agreed to help us get our organizational act together, and he's committed to bringing other organizations like Lulu to the table. And of course, Ray McClendon, the other person I think who will add a lot to the conversation next, has been very active with the NAACP and other organizations to bring them into the fold. So we expect to have an organization that is an organization of organizations that will use our collective strength to affect change in both the area of relational organizing as well as nonviolent direct action. And I'd like to have Ray.
Fantastic. Let me throw in one remembering, you mentioned American history. You should never do that in front of a history professor. Corporate boycotts were a big part of the American Revolution. The Tea Party was really a strike against the East India Tea Party, and it was viewed as a real economic warfare. And so I want to throw in a quick question that's risen. What about Coke versus Pepsi? Coke has supported voter rights. What is Pepsi doing?
Well, James made a recommendation that, and we're not, unless he wants to share it with you, that will give both of them an opportunity to do the right thing.
Okay,
so,
great. James or Joel, did you want to jump in and take us to the next? Thank you, Gloria.
Yeah.
I don't see any questions. If you want to ask Gloria a question, please raise your hand here. Gloria, it's really a joy and an honor to have you on here. And let's keep going. Joel, did you want to have Ray speak next?
Yeah, but I want to say something about Professor Tinubu from the distinguished HBCU Spelman. Ran for Congress, almost won, has been on the battlefield for just decades. But she's going to help us, and we're going to talk about the book in a second. Her and Ray are going to help us to get the voices for the lead organizers and activists in symposiums, in books and movies, and that's what we're going to talk about. So Gloria, thank you so much. Brother Ray McClendon, Political Action Director, NAACP.
Thanks, Joel. And see, we need a drum roll, we need a band in the back in order to have the opportunity to announce the fact that the one and only Harvard Sluggo Wasserman has agreed to chronicle in what I know will be a New York Times bestseller,
Right.
the Georgia Miracle, and the impact that it can have across America in terms of saving our democracy and ensuring that the United States does not indeed devolve into authoritarian rule. I think this is major. We want to thank Harvey for agreeing to do that and to allow for this to be documented in a way, not only just to ensure that the history books reflect the myriad of groups that came together that Gloria alluded to, but also that we can export this initially to other battleground states and give them, in effect, a toolkit on how they can replicate the Georgia Miracle to the benefit of saving democracy across this country. We've talked about the bills across the country, over 361 bills in 43 plus different states. They're all doing this off of the same playbook of basic laws that are being used. And if many of these laws, if they had been in place, think about it this way. If these laws had been in place in 2020, Trump would have been able to overturn the election from the state level without the January 6th insurrection being required. Because one of the parts of SB 202, although we talk about the criminalization of line warming and passing out bottles of water and how egregious that is, the most significant part of that bill is that the GOP-controlled legislature has stripped the Secretary of State of power on the state election board, will be able to replace him with their own puppet to go on that board, which will give them the authority to go into any county that they want to and take over the local county election board. And we know that Fulton County, which is the largest county in Georgia, which has the largest minority population in Georgia, already has a bullseye on its back. And there have been people who've already said out loud that a part of the reason for the law is for what happened in Fulton County. And what did happen in Fulton County was not fraud, was not anything that was improper or unethical. It was the fact that you had turnout that ensured the victory of Joe Biden in the presidential election in 2020, and then, of course, what happened in the runoffs in 2021. So those are the laws, and we see that they're saying these things now out loud. That's what's amazing. And so that's why it's important that we chronicle this and know how to fight it, because it's going to take a multi-pronged effect. It's going to take us educating people, and this book will be a major part of educating. We're going to have to register more people, and we're going to have to mobilize more people, as Gloria said, year round. And so it's going to be important, imperative that we have the resources that we need in order to be on a year-round footing. What is occurring now is there are groups that are already in process of raising money to attack not only voter support, to attack ensuring that voter suppression works, but that the conservative vote will come out in force to take back the seat that they felt like they should never have lost with Warnock. So we have to recognize that. The other thing that they're saying out loud, I don't know, Harvey, if you saw the National Review article where they're actually talking about the fact that everybody shouldn't have the right to vote, that they only want quote unquote smart voters. Well, I've never considered a lot of our good cousins from South Georgia, Middle Georgia, good old boys as being that articulate, but nevertheless, it wasn't a problem until a lot of Black and brown people started voting, that all of a sudden they looked at smart voters. In Mississippi, the Attorney General just said that they don't need a lot of young woke students voting. Tucker Carlson came on his show last week and said something similar, that by new people coming into this country and voting, that he was being quote unquote disenfranchised. So we're going to have to fight this year round. And so we want to thank Harvey for agreeing to do this. And then we certainly want to thank James FUKUDA for agreeing to step up, to know that we've got to raise money for this year round in order to register, educate, and mobilize voters. We're going to fight in the legal realm. We're going to boycott, absolutely, to bring pressure. But we must register, educate, and mobilize voters. And James is going to do an outstanding job, we know, in helping to raise money. So that goes on year round. With that, I'll ask James to talk about what he's doing to get us organized.
James Fukuda, you there? Are you
I'm here.
You want? Okay, let's hear it. How you doing, man?
I'm okay, but I got to tell you, Aaron Rodgers is going to be doing Jeopardy.
Well, he's we better not be get me going on Aaron Rodgers. All right, bro. What do we got for?
So on the organizing front, you know, the first thing that I have any ability to help these great people accomplish is to figure out strategies for financial retaliation and boycotting. And when we were talking just now, I made a note to myself to ask if anyone has contacts into Disney, please let us know. I've made contact with a couple of people in the finance department of Disney, because that's based here in New York. But for those of you who are not Marvel Comics Universe fans, a lot of the Marvel movies are shot in Georgia.
Really? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
They utilize the tax credits there. So,
wow.
You know, that's one that hits everybody. What we've talked about previously, we alluded to Coke versus Pepsi, is asking Coca-Cola for a leadoff donation. We want at least 250,000 bottles of water, along with little red wagons that they're welcome to put the Coke logo on, so that people have an organized way to go get themselves arrested for handing out water. And if Coke doesn't want to do it, we'll go to this good old New York-based corporation called Pepsi and give them a shot. Because you know Pepsi will do it.
Absolutely.
But I've been compiling a list. I've reached out to a few people already. Also, I've spoken to LULAC, Gloria, not Lulu. LULAC is the League of United Latin American Citizens. It's the oldest.
My apologies.
No problem.
Yes, but we have a great Lulu Friesdat who does fantastic. So when you mentioned Lulu, I thought that's who you're talking about.
Yeah,
It
me
occurred
too.
to me with LULAC. So we have a Lulu and a LULAC. We'll have to keep that separate.
Exactly. We've got two. So LULAC has volunteered that they will reach out to all of the meat packers in the state of Iowa, because that's likely to become one of the other states that can be flipped, because Mr. Grassley, I believe, is going to be 92 years old when 2022 rolls around. So he's likely to retire.
Let's hope.
And LULAC has already successfully met with all of the meat packers because they were the instrumental in lobbying to get PPE in the hands of all of their line workers. little piece of trivia: most of the line workers in meatpacking plants are Latino immigrants, documented and otherwise. So they know LULAC. They didn't like the LULAC boycott when it was about PPE, so they've already demonstrated their ability. And now if LULAC can say we have the NAACP and a cast of thousands besides, you know, that's where the true power comes from.
And James, you know, this foundation that we're all setting up, you're chairing it, the Blue Green Fund. Can you talk a little bit about kind of the bigger plan and what we're trying to do and why? And I can add a little bit after you finish.
Sure. So as Ray said, you know, this is becoming a year-round fundraising effort. So we need to get a you know, a really good, smooth website to market the efforts and entice people into those $10 and $20 contributions that everyone's always talking about on MSNBC. So I've secured a couple of domain names, and this week we need to talk about names and starting to get a visual presentation.
Excellent.
I want to have a landing page ready by right around the end of the month.
Yes.
Well, speaking for Steve Caruso, a little out of hand, I mean, we can always use the Election Protection 2024 website as well as a landing page. So it's always
Cool.
Anybody doing really great work like you are. We are thrilled to have you on that webpage.
I just saw.
Oh, thank you. There you go.
Yeah. Are you ready to hire a financial director, digital director? That's a question. That's something that, Rebecca, that's an important question that I'll give you my email so you can send me something on that. I do want to say that neither the Democratic or the Republican Party traditionally fund grassroots African-American, Hispanic, Asian Pacific American groups to do GOTV. Certainly the Democratic Party does not, because they don't really have an infrastructure. I've been in the party for 40 years. They're more of a fundraising machine, and they raise money for commercials. What we want to do through this Blue Green Foundation is we're going to raise our own money from private sources, individuals, you know, donors. And then if we can replicate the Georgia Miracle to other states, then they too can get people out to vote. But you can't do that, you know, like on the cheap. That's not realistic. So that's the purpose behind the foundation. I want to thank James and Ray and you know, Gloria for spearheading this effort. James is going to help us get the 501c3 and the C4. He's a very busy person. He's one of the largest developers of affordable housing in New York City, and you know, and for homeless people. So James, you know, thank you very much. James, is there anything else you wanted to add before I get to the other speakers? Or...
No, just put me on mute.
All right, bro. And we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers off camera.
Can we ask James a question, please?
Yeah, please, Art, go ahead.
James, this is for beyond your efforts. One of the things I'd be able to amplify via social media, because I have a number of influential journalists. Like in March, I had 233,000 views of my tweet. So I want to amplify what you're doing. But can you please explain right now the lay of the land at the national level? We've heard the publicity about pulling things out of Georgia, but it's unclear to me what is the lay of the land across different organizations of high-profile boycott drives that can engage a large number of progressives, particularly in addition to fighting against the state laws, pushing for H.R. 1, regardless of its flaws, and the John Lewis bills. In other words, without those bills, the state laws will take effect, and it's really, really important. And it doesn't seem to me that there's clear, focused, high-profile, celebrity-driven messaging nationally around boycotting. Boycotting companies that are still giving money to the GOP or insurrectionists or state or are tolerating.
Well, James, let me say a little bit about that.
Okay.
But first of all, that's not entirely true. Here in Georgia, we are on the front lines in doing that. There have been several protests at Coca-Cola. There was a protest on Saturday and Sunday at the Masters.
Oh, no, I understand about Georgia. I'm talking about the big national picture.
Well, what that has done though, and
Okay.
that's where I'm headed. What that has done though, on Saturday, there was a national call of CBS from over 100 companies saying that talking about the mistake that was made in Georgia, where they just kind of went along to get along, their lobbyists did. And they didn't recognize that the lobbyists most of these big corporations have in Georgia are former Republican operatives. So of course they were getting responses to say it's no big deal. So now the corporate community has recognized, from what I understand came out of the conference call they had on Saturday, was that they need to get out in front of this. They are not going to be intimidated by McConnell or any of these other Republicans, and they're going to continue to move that forward and stand up for voting rights across the country. Now we're going to have to help them along with our own moral authority, and I think that's one of the reasons we need a national response from a group like Save Our Democracy of coming up with a national game plan beyond what we were trying to do in Georgia, because they can always pick us off state by state. And I think we need something similar to what we did in the United States in the United States response to apartheid, because that's where we're headed. So when we look at what we did in the 70s and 80s and early 90s to promote disinvestment in the country of South Africa against apartheid, I think we need a similar disinvestment strategy, because what we really are dealing with in America is a move toward apartheid or minority rule. And that's one of the things that a coordinated boycott and disinvestment strategy should be done, should create, but nobody has done it comprehensively yet. And I'm hoping that this group, along with all of the great ideas and innovations that can come out of this group, can help to formulate that kind of campaign.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just wanted to, can I just add one thing?
Please.
That has come about as a result of these boycotts that Ray mentioned, is that Trump is now calling on his folks to boycott the companies that are speaking up against these laws. So he's calling for his folks to boycott the MLB and Coca-Cola and Delta and JP Morgan Chase, all of the companies that have, even though they've been mostly silent and started speaking out most recently, Trump is now calling for his folks to boycott them. Just to let you know.
That's fantastic. We could have, and I got to point out that at his recent fundraiser, I won't say on air what he called Mitch McConnell, but it was SOB. So I am thrilled that Donald, and I think in retaliation for Donald Trump's calls to boycott those companies, we should all boycott organized crime in response to Donald Trump. Okay, Joel,
Harvey,
please.
Or boycott him.
Harvey, what I want to do is, let's see, we're going to go over the book, and then we got Charles Moreland to talk about DC Statehood, but Steve Rosenthal, who is
Steve Rosenfeld.
I'm sorry, I don't know how I got that wrong, but and I'm a Jewish dude. I should know my Felds, man. But he's a renowned, journalist and author, and one of the co-authors of my former boss, Representative John Conyers' book, What Went Wrong with Ohio. But he has graciously agreed to work with you, Harvey, and Gloria and Ray and folks in Georgia to do a book on the Georgia miracle, which is a miracle in and of itself. But Steve, could you talk about the book and why this is important, how you want to do it? And also mention the fact that we have elections called mayors and local elected officials who will be impacted by these voter suppression laws as well. So it's not just concern about the midterms, it's also, you know, very important local races. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, hi, thanks everybody. And well, Joel reached out to me, and I was covering Georgia for Bill Moyer's website and a bunch of others. And as everybody remembers, just when we wanted to talk about who deserved credit for the senatorial runoffs, the insurrection happened, and nobody heard that. So where we are today is we've been talking about how it's really important, not for someone like me to rewrite what other people have to say, but to basically conduct interviews, have them edited and focus on different things with the activists themselves, the people who really did the work on the ground, who could tell how they did it. And as Gloria was talking about, sometimes these we have to say what it really means to have relational organizing. If I talk to Ken Martin, who's the head of the state chairman's Democratic Party chairs and Minnesota State Party chair, he'll say one thing, but that's not, I'm sure that's not what Gloria and what I saw in Georgia, what people mean. And then the question becomes, how can we put that forth in an organized way and have other elements available online, such as videotaped interviews of these people that we can transcribe and edit, and their tools that they used, and just put it out there so people can actually have a very tangible focus sense of what people did, how they did it, what were the real challenges, how they overcame them. And I would just say that people forget that most of these laws, the bad laws that are taking effect, are taking effect immediately upon passage. And even though this is an odd number year, there are mayoral races all over the place. So for example, we can actually turn to, I'm just looking at a list, Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia, Birmingham, Alabama, Orlando, Florida, Jackson, Mississippi. They're all having mayoral races this year. We can see how these new laws are going to be in effect. We can learn what people have to do to overcome them. And so, no matter what people think is in a law, until you see it in an election, nobody really knows where things break down and where the hurdles really come. So we can do all that, and we can keep people engaged, right, and focused now. And so that's what this is about. Joel recruited me to, encourage me to do it. I'm happy to do it. I want to learn as much as anybody from talking to these folks. But the whole idea is that, it's not about me rewriting other people's stories. It's about just helping to organize and get out of the way so people can tell it themselves, and people who can hear and be motivated can get that message and do what they need to do. So that's it.
Well, I want to mention that Steve and I worked together in 2004 in Ohio, and he was on the ground in Georgia, which is absolutely essential. And I look forward to working with Steve so we can produce this thing so that people can duplicate it. And you're absolutely right, Steve. We got elections coming up. I mentioned before on a previous call in Cleveland, Dennis Kucinich, the previous mayor who made so many great steps forward in Cleveland and then became a congressperson, is going to run again for mayor of Cleveland. And it'll be very interesting to see that. But Steve's work is impeccable. He was on the ground. He's been on the ground in Georgia, and it's really going to be great to produce this piece with him. I'm really looking forward to it. Real quickly, I want to jump in. We've been joined by two great Jennifers, Jennifer Tanner in Southern California. Welcome, Jennifer, and Jennifer Roberts, and former mayor of Charlotte. It's great to have you on with us as well. I want to give a hearty mazel tov to my old friend, Lissa Matras, who just had two daughters who had grandchildren for her within the last few weeks. That's the way to do it, one in London and one in California, a boy and a girl. So congratulations, Lissa, on that. And Joel, do you want to move to Charles Moreland to talk about statehood and how it's affected by the new rulings on the filibuster?
Yeah, and also, Harvey, just briefly, the fact that you're helping us with a documentary on the Georgia Miracle. Can you talk about that?
Well, we hope to make a documentary film about the Georgia miracle as well. I'm reaching out to some filmmakers. Since I haven't reached them yet, I shouldn't mention their name. I've got one in mind, and hopefully that'll work. But in addition to the book that we'll be writing with Steve Rosenfeld, we'll also do hopefully some kind of video documentary. The miracle in Georgia has got to be replicated worldwide, nationwide, and it's going to make a huge difference. And Steve is absolutely right. We've got very important races coming up on municipal levels that we're going to have to really watch. Election protection. I also want to mention, by the way, there is a recall, and maybe you folks in Georgia can comment. I read about a recall campaign being run on Kemp, the governor in Georgia. Is that actually happening? That'd be very interesting to see. Ray or Gloria, what's going on with that? Have you heard anything about a recall campaign against Brian Kemp in Georgia?
Yeah, I've heard something about it. I'm not really that excited about it. Honestly, I think we need to keep our eye on the prize of what our focus ought to be. As Steve was just focusing on, what we need to do is see what impact these new laws will have on the elections this year and have a game plan that we can put in place for test cases on this law for this year, and be prepared for 2022. We have a gubernatorial race in 2022, as well as we need to protect Warnock's seat in 2022. So our focus is really mobilizing around November 2021 and 2022, because we got our shot at Kemp will be next year, and he might not even get out of the primaries, given that Trump is opposed to him and all of the Trump forces. So we need to make sure that we get our people ready to get out to vote. That's okay. My view.
That's good. That's good. I want to mention we have 90 people on the call. I want to say hi to Emily Levy. Glad to have you with us, Emily, and your great work at Scrutineers. Also, Kenny Bruno, my buddy from Greenpeace. Great to have you back with us, Kenny, on these calls. Joel, did you want to call on the DC Statehood?
Yeah.
Go for it.
So, yeah, April the 27th, we're going to have a forum on defending our democracy at the Jimmy Carter Center at George Mason. So we're going to start a series of forums on anything dealing with defending democracy, filibuster, electoral college. This is really exciting. I hope that everybody on the Zoom call can, participate in that. And then he doesn't like when I call, well, I'm just going to say Professor Poga at Yale, the Global Studies Program, will be doing another symposium also on the Georgia miracle and the problems with voter suppression. And maybe we can talk about that next Monday. Haven't had a chance to talk to Professor Thomas for a while, but because of the holiday season. But yeah, Attorney Charles Moreland was the first elected representative of the District of Columbia, along with Jesse Jackson as senator. And he's been one of the most important leaders in the movement for DC statehood. He's going to give us an update, on where are we at with DC statehood, with the bill HR 51, and then how does the filibuster impact whether or not this bill can get passed or not. Charles, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Joel, and everybody for supporting our efforts to become first-class American citizens. As you know, taxation without representation is tyranny. The system of government that they impose on the citizens of Washington, D.C. is tyranny in its most shameful form. First, let me speak briefly to Gloria and Ray. I support you wholeheartedly in your commitment to continue and pursue your efforts to support a boycott. As was mentioned earlier, the Boston Tea Party was the first and earliest boycott. One of the things that I want to suggest specifically that you might be able to do to double down in the face of Donald Trump's threats is to consider what I would call a voter suppression procurement bill. We have a bill in DC that we're going to introduce in the next week that's called a no taxation without representation procurement bill. And what the bill would do in Atlanta, for instance, and other large cities in Georgia, that they are the economic engines of those states. So if the city of Atlanta passed a bill that stated that the city government would issue no contracts and do no business and purchase no services or products from individuals who supported voter suppression. We have a bill in DC that I'm going to send you guys a copy of, but I think that would make a big impression on the businesses and not only support them, but give them an incentive to oppose voter suppression bills. Regarding DC statehood, I sent Joel a notice. This week we're going to celebrate DC's Emancipation Day, DC Emancipation Day. Now, DC celebrates Emancipation Day because the District of Columbia freed enslaved persons 8 months before the Emancipation Proclamation. So we celebrate that annually. And the mayor is sponsoring a symposium, and I'll be one of the speakers where we're going to talk about statehood and the end of taxation without representation. So Joe, you're going to send that to everybody, and everybody's invited, and I hope you can attend. As for the status of DC statehood in the Congress, there's going to be a markup this week on the 16th. And at that markup, they're going to schedule the full House vote, which will probably take place next week. So we're pretty much guaranteed and assured that the House will pass it. We have 214 sponsors. And in the Senate, however, there's a different situation. We have, as of today, we have 42 sponsors in the Senate. That means that not all Democrats are on board. And even if all Democrats were on board, the filibuster is the obstacle. So we're close, we're hopeful, and we're not filled with fear, doubt, and disbelief, but we're just being very practical and realistic. We've been close before, but close doesn't count. We've been very close, and this is close. But that filibuster. Now, there is a discussion in the Senate to suspend the filibuster for voting rights. And of course, if the filibuster is temporarily suspended, then the plan is to try to get DC statehood in at the same time. Of course, everybody is clear that if there's no filibuster, or if the filibuster is suspended, or if we get rid of the filibuster, and everybody knows how I feel about that, the attacks on voting rights and voter suppression bills around the country are an existential threat to democracy, quite frankly. So right now we have to go all out, I believe, to do whatever we can. DC voting rights and the DC voting rights bill, DC Statehood bill, would clearly give Democrats a solid majority in the Senate without worrying about Joe Manchin. And I understand that Joe Manchin is leveraging his power, and there is a threat. And there are a lot of people who believe that at some point, Joe Manchin is going to flip the House, the Senate back to the Republicans by switching over to the Republicans. That is a threat. Joe Biden understands that, and so Joe Biden is being very, very cautious with Joe Manchin. So those are the things that we're dealing with in terms of DC statehood. While it seems close, we've been there before. The Democrats are not all in, and the Republicans have organized a campaign to stop DC statehood by any means necessary. They have one of the primary issues that they raise is that it's not constitutional. Well, we know that's not true. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution gives the Congress absolute control and power over the District of Columbia. So they raise a whole lot of issues that we've dealt with before. We've been fighting this. I certainly have since 1978, when we had the DC voting rights bill going around the country. That would have given us 2 senators and 1 US representative without granting us statehood, which was an incremental approach. So that's where we are. We're going to introduce this no taxation without representation procurement bill next week, which would prohibit any of our agencies or the DC government from purchasing services or products from any individual or company that supports taxation without representation. So that's where we are right now. We need as much help as we can get from progressives all over the country. But at the same time, I want you all to understand that we have begged and pleaded in as humble a fashion as any disenfranchised people anywhere in the world have pleaded for first-class citizenship. And I just don't believe that begging and pleading is going to suddenly cause the members of the Senate to say they're going to give us statehood. It's going to require some action. Number one, it's going to require DC citizens to stand up. You know, man can't ride your back unless it's bent. So one of the problems, in fact, I'm the founder and president of an organization called the DC Statehood Mobilization Action Committee. And our goal is to get DC citizens to stand up. One of the questions that people ask me from around the country is, how do DC citizens accept this? Because it is unacceptable. I can't accept it. Those of us who are engaged in the DC statehood movement, we find it unacceptable. But in fact, there are too many Washingtonians who wake up every day and accept the unacceptable. We are servants at the banquet table of democracy. Even our delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton, sits at this feast of freedom with an empty plate. But for some reason, Washingtonians wake up every day and accept this. So our goal is to turn people out in DC and make a just demand. And I think that's gonna happen over the next 30 days with some of the plans that we have. Joel has been gracious enough to sit in on some of our meetings. and he understands some of the problems that we have. If you look at the invitation and you see the invitation, you'll see the invitation says Charles Moreland, first shadow representative. And it lists our senators as shadow representatives. This, even though as I have related to this group, we should not refer to duly elected members of a congressional delegation as shadows. That's demeaning. But because of the mentality that our government officials, and this is from the mayor's office, you will see shadow representatives. But the Board of Election, we were elected as US representatives and US senators. So
Charles, this change in my understanding is that the Senate parliamentarian has loosened up the rule a bit on the filibustering in terms of the ability to get in under the finance clauses. Is there an opening here in the Senate on this ruling to move statehood forward without the filibuster, to get it around the filibuster?
No, the general consensus is that that DC statehood will not fit within that narrow
Okay.
ruling.
Are there any Republicans at all who have indicated that they might support DC statehood?
The Republicans have made it clear that they will die before they vote for DC statehood.
Okay.
They clearly understand. So we know where they are on that. And
All of them. There's no wavering among any Democrat, any Republicans?
Not one. In fact, we don't even have all Democrats on board.
Okay.
The two Arizona senators are not on board. Of course, Mnuchin is not on board. We expect that Kelly from Arizona, Gabby Giffords' husband,
Yeah.
will be on board because Gabby Gifford supported statehood, but is not on board yet. So we have 4 Democrats who are not on board yet, and one that that will never come on board because he's with the Republicans on that. And that's why I say it's close, but there's very little likelihood unless we do something different, and we are planning to do that. And we're going to need your help, and we appreciate you. Can't be done without you, without the progressives, without Joel, without all of you. So
Okay, we're on board. We're good for it. I have a sister, a niece, and a nephew in DC, and 4 great grand whatever niece and nephews. So totally on board. Does anyone have any questions on DC statehood? Joel, did you want to add anything? Charles, it's always great to have you on. You're so articulate. It's wonderful to hear you speak. Let me just terminate right now the recorded part. Everyone, it's been great to be with you. We appreciate, we've had more than 70 people through the whole call, more than 90 at some point. It's glad to be back after our 2-week break. Thank you, Mike Hirsch and Steve Caruso for engineering, Joel Siegel for co-convening. We are going to be doing documentaries and books about the Georgia Miracle. We're going to be pushing DC statehood. We're going to do all that great stuff. We will meet again next week on Monday, 5 p.m. At Eastern time, and that's April 19th. And we will continue week by week as we continue towards, it'll be almost a year, I believe in May, that we've been doing these. This was the 46th Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We are going to turn off the recording now